Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the East Coast of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the House of Seven Beggars, and therefore it must be Zeyde Story Corner. Yes, Zeyde Story Corner. Of course. Yeah. Okay, well, it's not running. I know it's not running, yes. Yes, Kindle seems to be having some emotional issues. I mean, we had it up and running earlier, and now it just seems to want to take its time. There we go. Yeah. Not really sure. Yeah, that's actually even the right page and everything. Okay. So let's check and see who we have in the chat room. We have Shlomo and Shoshi, I assume. Miriam, Marshall, Veronica, and Guy. And others in the background. Yeah, others in the background who are not logged in. And of course, those people who will be coming in later on. So, okay, so we in the Rabbi Nachman book. Yes, we are in the Tales of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov by Adam Steinsaltz. And we are in the story, The Merchant and the Peasant, or The Merchant and the Pauper. You got to read it. Yeah, I know. I gotta remember to read it. Okay, so we left off again. This is a very long story, so we left it with a cliffhanger, as I like to do. Yes, as you like to do. Keeps them coming back. Yep. If they want to hear the rest of the story, they got to keep coming back. Yeah. So let's see. Why don't we get you onto your camera here, and turn this one off and this one on. There I am. Okay. Here we go. We are ready to start reading this story today. Okay. So, I see Kelsey Lynn has joined us. And she says, YouTube has been acting wonky all day. Yeah, the whole computers have been acting wonky all day today. So anyway, we are going to continue with the story, The Merchant and the Pauper, that we started last week. And this is one of the stories of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And I'm going to back up a little bit just to remind you of where we were in this story before. So, remember, there is a merchant who was very rich, and his friend, the pauper, who was not so rich, and the pauper's wife, and he had a dream. They both had a dream that each of the other one took the other's place. The rich man became poor, and the poor man became rich. So anyway, the guard comes, or actually the general comes and steals the pauper's wife, and the merchant goes to rescue her. So here is where we pick up this story tonight. Okay. She was very frightened when she saw him, but he calmed her, telling her that she must leave with him immediately. Only when they had left and had passed by all the guards on the way out, did he realize how reckless he had been, the merchant, you see. It was truly a rash deed, and there was certain to be a great outcry. Shortly, the alarm was raised, and together they hid for 2 days in a cistern full of rainwater, till the danger passed. The pauper's wife was deeply moved by the great devotion the merchant was showing her, and by the trials and tribulations he was enduring because of her. And she swore by God that whatever good fortune might in time be hers, she would deny him nothing. Whatever he desired of her future good fortune or prosperity, she would give him, even if by doing so she would become poor again. Now, such an oath must be witnessed, and she made the very cistern in which they were hiding her witness. Okay, I see Kat and David have joined us. Okay. 2 days later, they emerged and journeyed until they came to another place where he realized they were still being pursued. This time they found refuge in a bathing place. Once again, she marked his devotion and the trials and tribulations he was enduring because of her. And once again, she swore that if fortune ever favored her, she would deny him nothing. This time, she called upon the reservoir as her witness. They remained there, too, for about 2 days, and then they continued on their journey. When the merchant discovered that the pursuers had once more caught up with them, they hid again. A lot of hiding going on. This happened 7 times. 7 times they were in danger. And 7 times they concealed themselves by water. In a cistern, in a bathing place, by a lake, a spring, a creek, a river, and a sea. And in each place of concealment, she noted his devotion and the trials and tribulations he had endured because of her, and she swore her oath and called on the place itself as a witness. This happened, as I said, 7 times, until they came to the sea. The merchant was a great trader. He knew routes across the sea, and so they returned quickly to their own country, where he restored the pauper's wife to her husband. Thereupon there was great simcha, great rejoicing. In reward for this extraordinary deed, and for his having withstood temptation with another man's wife, God gave the merchant a son, born that very year. The pauper's wife, too, was rewarded for having withstood temptation with the general and with the merchant, and she gave birth to a daughter. This girl was extremely beautiful. Her beauty was sublime, unlike that found among mortals. The people used to say, "May she be spared, for such a phenomenal child is raised with great difficulty." Such beauty and splendor had never been seen by man before. People used to come from afar just to look upon her, and showered her with many gifts of affection upon her. These gifts were so numerous that before long the pauper became rich. How wonderful for him, huh? I see Dave has joined us. Dave, I hope your son is doing well. Okay, back to this story. We take these little side trips every once in a while. Okay. It occurred to the merchant that he should arrange a match between his son and the pauper's daughter because of her great and unique beauty. This, he thought, might be the significance of the dreams in which all his possessions were transferred to the pauper and those of the pauper to him. Were the children joining in marriage, the two families would be united. One day, the pauper's wife came to visit the merchant, and he told her of his desire to arrange a match and thereby, perhaps, fulfill their dreams. Remember, they both had the same dream. She answered, I too have considered this, but I did not dare to raise the subject. If, however, it is your desire too, I am certainly willing. I shall deny you nothing. Have I not sworn that all my good fortune will always be at your disposal? The son and the daughter studied together, learned languages and arts and sciences. The daughter's beauty continued to grow. People continued to visit her just to look upon her beauty. And the gifts they brought made the pauper a very rich man. Even the nobility came to see her, and in their eyes, too, her beauty was unique. It was no mortal loveliness. These nobles began to consider the possibility of arranging a match with the pauper. And there was one in particular who wished to pledge his son to the beautiful daughter. However, nobility cannot intermarry with common folk. And so they sought to raise the pauper's status by arranging for him to go into the service with the emperor. At first, he was a sergeant, but he was rapidly promoted. So many noblemen were interested in his advancement that he rose swiftly through the ranks. All wished to make a match with him, and all sought his promotion. Nevertheless, as his daughter was engaged to another, he could not conclude a match, and the matter was left conveniently open. Eventually, he became a general. He succeeded so well that the emperor sent him to fight wars, and he was victorious every time. He became a very high and mighty person. When the emperor died, the council of the people assembled and proposed him as the new ruler, whereupon the nobles convened and appointed him emperor. The new emperor went on to fight many wars and conquer many lands. After a while, other countries came to hear of his great success. They began to surrender to him voluntarily, because all the beauty and all the good fortune in the world appeared to be with him. Eventually, all the kings in the world convened and decided that he should rule over them. They made him emperor over the whole world, and they gave him a document inscribed with gold letters. You see, Miriam has joined us. Good to have you. Okay. The emperor was no longer willing to keep the promise of a marriage bound with the merchant's family. Is it fitting that an emperor should give his daughter to the son of a merchant? On the other hand, his wife, now the empress, refused to withdraw from the agreement. When the emperor saw that he would not be able to arrange an alternative match for his daughter as long as the merchant stood in his path, all the more so since his wife remained loyal, he began to devise means of getting rid of him. First, he intrigued by plot and deceit to impoverish him. It was not difficult for the emperor to do this. And shortly, the merchant started to lose money and became a pauper. Even so, the empress remained steadfast in her pledge. The emperor then realized that he would not be able to make another match for his daughter as long as the merchant's son was alive, and he devised means to dispose of him. He had the young man brought to trial and told the judges what the verdict and sentence he wanted. Oh, such a terrible thing, huh? The merchant's son was accordingly condemned to be tied in a sack and cast into the sea. The empress was deeply grieved, but she was powerless to act against the emperor. So, she went to the officials whose task it was to carry out the sentence and fell at their feet and implored them for her sake to spare the young man. What had he done to deserve death? She begged them to let the innocent man go free and cast some other condemned prisoner who truly deserved such a fate into the sea in his place. Her pleading was successful, and they swore to her that they would do as she asked. Accordingly, they cast someone else into the sea and released the young man, telling him to make his escape immediately. And so the merchant's son, now grown up, went into exile. Even before this happened, the empress had told her daughter that the merchant's son was her appointed bridegroom. The mother told her daughter the whole story of what had befallen her, of how the merchant had shown such devotion and had endured hardship and danger for her sake. He was with me in 7 places of concealment, and in each of them I swore by God that I would never withhold from him anything that belonged to me. I called on each of the 7 places of water as witness. You are now all my success and my good fortune, and it is clear that you are his and he is yours. However, your father has been blinded by pride and seeks to have the young man killed. Even so, my daughter, you must always remember that he is your appointed bridegroom, and never agree to another in his place. The daughter, too, was a God-fearing person, and she took her mother's words to heart, promising to honor the pledge. She sent the merchant's son a letter to the effect that she regarded herself as betrothed to him and him alone as her bridegroom. She also sent him a map that she had drawn, showing all the places in which her mother had hidden with his father, the 7 witnesses to her mother's oath, the cistern, the reservoir, the others. She charged him to take great care of this document, which she signed with her name. After the merchant's son had been set free by those appointed to put him to death, he set out on his travels. After some time, he reached the sea and set sail. A tempest arose and drove his ship onto a desert coast, where it was wrecked. However, all the passengers were saved and went ashore. As the coast was remote from all shipping routes, so that no help could be expected from the sea, the survivors separated, each one making his own way to search for food and water. The young man also set out into the wilderness. He walked farther and farther from the shore until he could no longer return. The more he tried to find his way back, the deeper he wandered into the wilderness, until he realized there was no return. He had a bow and arrows with which he defended himself against the wild beasts of the wilderness, and he found sufficient food. Eventually, he emerged from the desert, and he reached a place that was habitable, but in which no one lived. Now water was there in abundance, and trees that bore fruit. He decided to settle there, for it would be difficult to return to civilization. Since there was fruit to eat and water to drink, and he could shoot an occasional hare or deer with his bow for meat, and even catch delicious fish in the stream, it seemed an excellent place to spend the rest of his life. The emperor, believing that the sentence had been carried out and that the merchant's son was no longer alive, felt he could now proceed to arrange a suitable match for his daughter, and negotiations began with various kings. He built a suitable royal court for her, and she lived there with the noble's daughters she had chosen to be her companions. She spent her time playing various musical instruments, rejecting all ideas of a negotiated match, and insisting that each and every suitor come to her in person. The emperor's daughter was very proficient in the art of poetry. A special podium was constructed on which the royal suitors stood when they declaimed their poems of love and desire, each one with his words of love. To some she sent an answer, also in verse and words of affection, one of her noble companions. To others who pleased her more, she herself declaimed the verses of her affection reply, and to those whom pleased her more, she showed herself and let them look upon her face when she answered. However, she rejected them all, ending her answer with the words that none understood. But the waters have not passed over you. The suitors to whom she revealed her face were overwhelmed by her beauty. Some would swoon. That's being swooned, huh? Okay. Some would swoon. No, I'm not going to do that again. Whereas others went mad with love. Kings continued to seek her hand, and nevertheless, to all of them, she gave the same reply. Now, the merchant's son settled down in the deserted spot. He too was proficient in verse and learned in the art of music. He found suitable wood and fashioned musical instruments and made strings from animal gut, and he played and sang to himself. Occasionally he would take out the letter from the emperor's daughter and play and sing, recalling everything that had befallen him from the time that his father had been a rich merchant to his exile in this place. One day he went into the forest, selected a tree, and made a mark on it. Then he carved out a hollow and hid the letter in it, and stayed there for a while. Some time later, a great tempest felled all the trees in the forest, and he could no longer find the one in which he had hidden the letter. When the forest had been intact, he could recognize his own tree by the mark he made. But now that it was one among a fallen, broken multitude, this was no longer possible. It was not feasible to split open all the trees in order to find the letter, for there were far too many. He was grief-stricken and wept greatly. He realized that were he to remain there, he would go mad with regret and sorrow. So he decided to leave. No matter what might happen to him on the way, it would be more dangerous for him to dwell there in his grief. So we are going to pause here. We are going to take a break. And when we return, we shall see what happens to this poor boy, and if he ever does find his bride. So please, everybody stay tuned. We will be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Glad you all stuck around, huh? Probably want to hear the rest of the story, eh? Okay, let us get on with the story, huh? It's getting pretty interesting, huh? Okay. So, let's see. He's decided to go because he was going to go mad. Okay, so we pick it up there. So, he packed some meat and fruit in his knapsack and set on his way, making marks to show him the way back. After a while, he reached a town, and he asked in which country he was. The people told him, and he asked if they knew anything about the emperor. They said that they did. Then he inquired about the emperor's beautiful daughter, and they replied that they had heard about her, and that no suitor could win her hand in marriage. Since he could not go to her in person, he approached the king of the country and told him the whole story, that he was the true bridegroom of the emperor's daughter, and that this was the reason for her refusing to marry anyone else. Since he himself could not go near the emperor's court, he would give the king certain signs, like the 7 places of water, and that the king might go and arrange the marriage with her, for which he would be properly compensated. You should look, huh? The king recognized that the young man was speaking the truth, for such a story could hardly be contrived. And so he accepted the mission. However, he realized that it would not be to his benefit to bring the daughter back with the young man still there. On the other hand, he was not inclined to have him killed, for, after all, the young man had done him a favor. So the king decided to exile him to another land about 200 miles distant. The young man was very vexed that he had been banished just because of the good deed he had done for the king. So he went to the king of the second country, and to him too he told the entire story, giving him the signs, but in greater detail, and urging him to set out immediately in order to reach the emperor's daughter before the first king. Even were he to get there after the first, his signs would be more convincing. However, this second king thought like the first, and he too exiled the young man to a land 200 miles away. The merchant's son was very vexed, and he approached the third king. You would think after the second time he would be a little smarter, but well, anyway. He approached the third king, to whom he gave even more signs and proofs, including instructions on how to draw the map of the 7 places of concealment. But this king, too, thought like the others, and sent the young man 200 miles away. Meanwhile, the first king traveled quickly and called on the emperor's daughter. He composed a poem skillfully, introducing in all the places of water, that is, the 7 witnesses to the mother's oath. However, he arranged the names as they sounded best to him, according to the rules of poetry, rather than in the correct order. The emperor's daughter was astonished to hear the 7 secret places mentioned, and she thought that he was indeed her bridegroom. He had indeed failed to mention the places in their proper order, and that caused her some difficulty. But she thought that it could probably be attributed to requirements of art and pomposity. So she decided that he was the one. She wrote him a note saying that she accepted his suit. There was much rejoicing and excitement at the news that the beautiful daughter had found herself a groom, and preparations were begun for the wedding. Meanwhile, the second king, who had been given even more signs by the merchant's son, made haste and arrived at the royal residence. When he was told that she had already chosen a bridegroom, he paid no attention, saying that he had something to say that would certainly succeed. So they let him present his suit. And in his poem, he gave all the places in their proper order, and furthermore, added one more sign. She asked him how the first king too had known these signs. But since he could not tell her the truth, he said, "Search me." No, he said, "I do not know." All this was most strange to her, and she wondered how the first king had known the places that no man could possibly guess. Nevertheless, she decided that the second king must be her bridegroom, since he had given the places in the correct order with an additional sign. She thought that the first king had probably uttered the places in poetic fancy without knowing what they meant. Meanwhile, the third king, who had been given even more convincing signs and also had a map, made haste and presented himself as a prospective groom. He too was told that she had already made her choice, but he said he had something that would certainly succeed. And so the third king entered and recited his poem with even more convincing signs, and then showed her a copy of the map. She was now completely bewildered and at a loss. The first and second kings had also mentioned the places, and she therefore declared that she would believe no one who did not bring her her own letter. The merchant's son grew weary of being sent away time after time and decided to present himself before the emperor's daughter. Perhaps he would succeed by himself. When at last he arrived, he told her companions that he had something to tell her that would certainly succeed. Boy, you heard that story before, huh? They let him in too. What the heck, you already let three of them in, you might as well let a fourth in, huh? Okay, they let him in too, and he recited his poem. The signs he cited were even more convincing than those of the others. And in addition, he reminded her of their youth and how they had studied together in the same class. He told her, in fact, he himself had sent the 30 kings after he had lost the original letter in the tree. But she was so confused that she refused to heed what he said. After all, the other kings had also made excuses about why they did not have the original letter, and after many years, she could not possibly recognize him. In fact, she decided not to rely on the signs. From now on, she would only accept her own letter. Smart girl, huh? Realizing that he could do nothing to convince her, the merchant's son decided to return to his place in the wilderness and spend the rest of his life there. He was dismayed by people in the world and thought that it was better to live out his remaining years in solitude. So he wandered around for several years until he found his way back to his place in the desert and settled there, eating the fruits of the tree just as before. Now, there was a murderous scoundrel who lived on the sea. When this murderer heard of the existence of the wondrous beauty, he sought to capture her. He did not want her for himself, being a eunuch, but thought that he would be able to sell her to a king for a large sum of money. He was an unprincipled scoundrel, and like all murderers, quite unconcerned about what would happen to him if he failed. He began to take the necessary steps to implement his scheme. First, he bought a huge amount of goods of magnificent quality and variety. Then he made birds of gold, so artfully contrived they seemed actually to be alive, and prepared stocks of gold as purchase. Such large birds standing on thin stalks that did not break appeared to be a great wonder. In addition, he contrived to make it appear that they were singing, one clucking with its beak, another whistling, and another thrilling. It was, in fact, all a clever trick. Concealed actors made the appropriate sounds, and the birds were moved by strings. Then the murderer set sail with his cargo. When he reached the land where the emperor's daughter resided, he dropped anchor and presented himself as a great merchant with many goods to sell. People came on board his ship to buy many kinds of precious objects. He remained there for some time, 3 months or more, and all the while the town folk came to buy from him, and they showed what they had purchased to others. The emperor's daughter also desired to purchase something, so she sent him a note inviting him to bring her some of his goods. He replied that it was not his practice to bring merchandise to the buyer, and anyone who wished to purchase from him, even the emperor's daughter, would have to come to him. Nobody could force him to act otherwise. The emperor's daughter decided to go to him. As was her custom on leaving the palace, she veiled her face, lest anyone who saw her beauty be smitten by it and fall into a swoon. Okay, enough of that, huh? Okay. Together with some of her companions and the guard, she visited the merchant, who was none other than the murderous scoundrel, and purchased various objects. When they departed, the merchant told her that if she came again, he would show her even more beautiful objects, wonderful and rare. She visited the merchant again, buying things. After a while, she became a regular visitor to the ship. One day, he opened the special chamber where the golden birds were standing, and when she saw them, she was overcome with amazement. The soldiers and her companions also wanted to look, but he refused to let them, telling her, "No, no, I won't show them to anybody but you, for you are the emperor's daughter." So she went in by herself, but he followed her, locked the door, overpowered her, and put her into a sack. And that, dear friends, is where we are going to stop for this evening. Okay. Love a cliffhanger, huh? Okay. I want to thank you all for being here with me tonight. I hope you will be here on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for the Torah study with Rabbi A. and Rabbi Reuven. And of course, Shabbat, Kabbalat, and Ma'ariv, the Shabbat service at 8 p.m. And on Shabbat, Shacharit and Musaf service at 10 a.m. And of course, be right back here on Monday, because you don't want to you want to be here when we find out what happens to the murderous scoundrel. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I hope to see you again. Until the next time, dear friends, Lehitaraot.